Did Oscar Piastri really deserve a 10-second penalty in Brazil? Or has the FIA gone too far with its new regulations? What you're going to discover here may change how you view Formula One racing this season. Round 6. The tension is dense, palpable. The Brazilian Grand Prix has just restarted after a chaotic accident involving Gabriel Bortolito, the local driver, which left his car embedded in the barriers at the exit of Turn 10. During the 5 previous laps, the cars had been compacted behind the safety car with cold tires, brakes still far from optimal temperature, and a track that, although dry, still had areas with little grip. The grille was compressed like a pressure bottle about to explode. Lando Norris, in front, accelerates strategically just before entering the main straight. Behind, Oscar Piastri is fourth, with Charles Leclerc ahead in third and young Kimi Antonelli in second, both seemingly more focused on looking after each other than what was coming from behind. But Piastri, knowing that he cannot lose any more ground in the championship, reacts with a decision that would become the turning point of his sporting career this season. Visualize the Interlagos route. The main straight is short, but it launches into a downhill, tight, multi-radius curve, Senna's famous S. A point where space is reduced to a minimum. There, Piastri sees an opportunity. While Antonelli defends slightly to the outside, and Leclerc draws a central line, the Australian from McLaren launches with too much determination on the inside. The maneuver is technically reckless. 3 cars side by side at a point where 2 can barely fit. The key is in the meters before the apex. According to the new 2025 FIA rules, a driver attacking on the inside is only entitled to space if his front axle is level with the mirror of the car he is overtaking before the corner. Piastri was not. Its angle of entry was so closed that it barely touched the line of the interior piano. And there, in that fraction of a second where reflexes dominate logic, he tries to brake. But it blocks the front left wheel. A cloud of white smoke rises as his McLaren loses grip and momentarily becomes an uncontrolled projectile. The impact is inevitable. Piastri touches Antonelli's Mercedes, whose car destabilizes and hits Leclerc's Ferrari in a chain sequence. Leclerc, without the opportunity to react, sees his left front suspension collapse after the side impact. The tire comes loose and the red car remains motionless on the side of the track. It is an immediate abandonment. Antonelli, although beaten, manages to continue. And Piastri, despite having been the origin of everything, also continues, at least until his time in the pits, where he would serve his 10-second punishment. What could have been an iconic pass ended up being a monumental miscalculation. But beyond the incident, what happened in that corner represents the eternal dilemma of modern Formula One. When should a driver risk everything and when should he brake to avoid chaos? Piastri chose to take a risk. The FIA chose to punish. When the engines are turned off and the cameras stop recording, what remains is the cold, meticulous technical analysis. That is precisely what the FIA did after the incident at Interlagos. The team of marshals, in coordination with experts from the Remote Operations Center, ROC, in Geneva, activated the complete post-race investigation protocol. The goal? Determine precisely who was at fault and whether a penalty was appropriate. This time, the verdict did not take long to arrive. And it was devastating for Oscar Piastri. Telemetry data from the McLaren MCL39 was the first to be examined. There, the researchers found a clear pattern. Piastri's deceleration at the entrance to the curve was not progressive, but instead evidenced a sudden swoop, a sign of a blockage in the left front axle. This detail alone already warned of a loss of control, something incompatible with a maneuver considered reasonable and safe, according to Technical Regulation 2025. But there was more. The FIA driving regulations, updated to version 4.1 in February 2025, incorporated crucial changes to the criteria for validating an overtake. It is no longer enough to show the car inside or to be half a car next to it. Now, the rule requires 3 fundamental conditions for the attacker to have the right to space and therefore be exempt from a penalty if contact occurs. First, the front axle of the car you are trying to overtake must be, at a minimum, even with the mirror of the car in front before the apex of the curve. Second, the car must be kept under complete control throughout the entire entry, turn, and exit sequence. This means braking in a stable manner, without blocking and without aggressive steering wheel corrections. And third, the chosen trajectory must be logical and executable, that is, the car does not go outside the track limits and does not depend on the rival getting up or moving away for the maneuver to work. In Piastri's case, he failed on at least 2 of those 3 conditions. He failed to match Antonelli's front axle at any point before the apex, and the brake lock made it clear that he completely lost control. These two rulings were enough for the FIA to rule full liability for the contact. This rigorous approach addresses a deeper need, restoring clarity and consistency to decision-making. For years, sanctions in Formula One were criticized for being unpredictable, even capricious. With this new policy, the FIA intends not only to punish but to educate. Each sanctioned incident becomes jurisprudence for the future. And every pilot knows that the margin of error, especially in highly complex maneuvers like Piastri's, has been drastically reduced. But this uniform criterion also brings with it a new dilemma. To what extent can a driver's instinct be regulated without suffocating the essence of the sport? Is it fair to apply such a severe penalty when the actual damage was greater to the opponent, but there was no obvious intention? The FIA believes so. He believes that only with clear, inflexible rules, a fair championship can be built. And Piastri, with his overflowing ambition, became the perfect example to demonstrate that these rules no longer allow interpretation, just precise execution. What happened in that first corner of the Brazilian Grand Prix was not just a driving error or an isolated penalty. It was a seismic shock at the heart of the 2025 Formula One Championship. The penalty on Oscar Piastri set off a chain reaction whose effects are still being felt, both in the standings and in the confidence of the teams involved. In a year where margins are tighter than ever, losing 10 seconds, a car or a few key points can cost titles. Charles Leclerc, the most physically affected by the incident, had one of his best opportunities in Brazil to regain ground in the championship. Ferrari had brought a specific aerodynamic update for the Interlagos track, and its previous simulations pointed to a direct fight with McLaren and Red Bull. His pace in practice placed him among the fastest of the weekend, and since Friday he looked confident behind the wheel of the SF25. But the crash took away all possibility. Not only was he left out of the race, but with his abandonment, Ferrari lost vital points in the fight for the Constructors' Championship. With Leclerc out of action and Piastri penalized, the way was opened for direct rivals such as George Russell, Kimi Antonelli, and above all, Max Verstappen. While Piastri served his pit penalty, Verstappen capitalized with an alternative tire strategy, gaining positions he would not have otherwise achieved. That is to say, the McLaren driver's error not only affected those directly involved, but also altered the entire order of the competition. But the quieter impact, though just as profound, occurred within McLaren itself. Oscar Piastri had just achieved consecutive podiums in China and Japan. He was in full ascendancy within the championship, beginning to establish himself as a true contender for the title. The pressure on him was increasing, especially as he shared a garage with Lando Norris, world leader until that moment. Brazil's sanction not only made it fall positions in the general classification, but also opened a crack in its psychological momentum. Within the team, the conversation changed. There was no longer talk of a balanced internal struggle between its two pilots. The consistency of Norris was once again prioritized, and after avoiding the incident, he extended his lead as the championship leader. Internal orders, strategic decisions, and even the management of future improvements to the car began to lean clearly in its favor. In an environment as competitive as the current one, that difference in status can have permanent consequences during the season. For their part, Mercedes and Red Bull saw an unexpected opportunity in the chaos of Brazil. Russell and Antonelli took advantage to score important points. And in the case of Verstappen, each advantage accumulated is one more step towards his possible fifth world crown. With a grid divided between four main contenders: McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull, incidents like this decide races, but also shape narratives. They give direction to the season. Off the track, the effects were just as intense. In the paddock, rumors began about whether Piastri would be protected by McLaren or if media pressure could make him lose ground within his own team. Social media exploded with divided opinions. Some defended him for attempting an aggressive overtake. Others condemned him for ruining Leclerc's career and dragging Antonelli down with him. But the damage was already done. And most importantly, the points were already lost. At this level of competition, success or failure is not measured just in tenths of a second. It is measured in decisions. And Piastri's, in that curve, was the one that reconfigured the 2025 championship board. From that moment on, everything changed. The championship continues, but with an altered narrative. And mistakes like this, beyond 10 seconds on the track, can cost years of legacy in a driver's history. This incident, that of Oscar Piastri in Brazil, leaves us with much more than a simple penalty in the results books. It leaves us with an uncomfortable question that haunts every modern Formula One fan. To what extent are we willing to sacrifice the spirit of motorsport for the promise of regulatory justice? Because what we saw at Interlagos was, yes, a poorly executed maneuver, but also a brave attempt to create a moment of greatness, to challenge the limits, to take risks when others raise their foot. Leave me in the comments what you think about all this.